My wife was cheating with her coworker. She thought she was clever. She had no idea I was 10 steps ahead. This is how I exposed her double life and took everything back. She lied about a work conference, but I wasn't buying it. So I did what she never expected. I followed the trail, hired a PI, and watched her house of cards collapse. What she thought was a weekend getaway with her secret lover turned into the beginning of her downfall and my freedom. Hey viewers, welcome to the channel. We are just starting, and your support means a lot. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. So this happened about 6 months ago, and I'm still processing everything. I never thought I'd be one of those guys posting on here, but here we are. I guess I need to get this off my chest because keeping it bottled up is eating me alive. I, 32M, and my wife Sarah, 30F, had been married for 8 years. We met in college, dated for 3 years, got married right after graduation. She was everything I thought I wanted in a partner: smart, funny, beautiful, ambitious. We had what I thought was a solid relationship. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that seemed insurmountable. About 2 years ago, Sarah got a new job at a marketing firm downtown. She was excited about it, and I was happy for her. The pay was better, the opportunities were there, and she seemed genuinely enthusiastic about the work. She'd come home talking about her colleagues, the projects they were working on, the office culture. There was this one guy she mentioned a lot. Let's call him Mark. Mark was the creative director, apparently this really talented guy who'd worked at some big agencies in New York before moving to our city. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Sarah had always been friendly and got along well with her coworkers. She'd mention Mark here and there, usually in the context of some project they were collaborating on or some creative idea he'd pitched. I was just glad she was enjoying her job and felt valued at work. But then things started to change, slowly at first. Sarah began working later hours. She'd text me saying she had to stay late for a client presentation or a brainstorming session. She started going out for drinks with her team more often. Again, nothing that seemed immediately suspicious, just a busy professional adapting to a demanding job. The first real red flag came about 6 months into her new job. Sarah had always been pretty private about her phone, but it wasn't like she was secretive about it. She'd leave it on the counter, answer calls in front of me, that sort of thing. But I started noticing she was taking her phone with her everywhere: to the bathroom, to get a glass of water, even just to switch laundry from the washer to the dryer. When I'd walk into a room while she was texting, she'd quickly close whatever she was looking at. When I asked her about it, she said she was just dealing with some work stuff and didn't want to bore me with the details. She said Mark was a perfectionist and would send messages at all hours about projects, and she didn't want the constant notifications to bother me. It seemed reasonable enough, so I let it go. But then came the changes in our physical relationship. We'd always had a pretty healthy, intimate life, nothing spectacular but consistent and satisfying for both of us. But Sarah started becoming more distant. She'd go to bed earlier, saying she was exhausted from work. When we did have intimate moments, she seemed distracted, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. I tried talking to her about it, but she insisted she was just stressed about work and promised things would get better once she settled into the new role. The breaking point came about 4 months ago. Sarah said she had to go to a weekend conference in the next state over. It was for marketing professionals, some big networking event that her company was sponsoring. She'd be gone Friday through Sunday. She seemed excited about it, kept talking about the speakers and the workshops she wanted to attend. I wished her well and told her to have a good time. She left Friday morning, and I had the weekend to myself. I decided to tackle some home improvement projects I'd been putting off. Saturday afternoon, I was at the hardware store picking up supplies when I ran into Jake, who works at Sarah's company in the IT department. We'd met at a few company holiday parties. Jake asked me how I was doing, and I mentioned that Sarah was at the marketing conference. He looked confused and said there was no conference that weekend, at least none that the company was sponsoring or sending anyone to. He said he would know because he handles the travel expense reports. My stomach dropped. I tried to play it off, said maybe I'd gotten the details wrong, but Jake's confusion was genuine. He even pulled out his phone to check the company calendar, confirming there were no work-related travel events scheduled. I drove home in a daze. My mind was racing, trying to come up with innocent explanations. Maybe it was a personal development thing she was doing on her own time. Maybe she'd gotten the dates wrong when she told me. But deep down, I knew something was seriously wrong. I spent the rest of Saturday and all of Sunday in this weird state of denial and panic. I kept checking my phone, hoping Sarah would call or text with some explanation that would make everything make sense. She did text a few times generic messages about how the conference was going, how much she was learning, looking forward to seeing me Sunday night. When she got home Sunday evening, she seemed relaxed and happy. She had all these stories about the sessions she'd attended, the people she'd met. She was so detailed and convincing that for a moment, I almost believed maybe Jake had been wrong. But something about the way she was talking felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced these stories. I didn't confront her that night. I needed time to think, to figure out what I was going to do with this information. I barely slept, just lay there next to her, wondering who this person was that I'd been married to for 8 years. The next few weeks were torture. I became hyper-aware of everything Sarah did and said. I started paying attention to patterns I'd previously ignored. The late nights at work always seemed to coincide with days when she'd mentioned Mark had been in the office. The mysterious phone calls she'd take in the other room. The way she'd sometimes come home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. I knew I needed proof before I did anything drastic. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I hired a private investigator. I found someone online who specialized in marital investigations. It felt like the most surreal thing I'd ever done, like I was living in some made-for-TV movie. The investigator was professional and discreet. I gave him Sarah's schedule, her workplace information, anything that might be helpful. He said he'd start surveillance and get back to me within a week or two. It only took 5 days. The investigator called me at work on a Thursday afternoon. He said he had photos and video evidence if I wanted to see it, but he could also just give me the basic facts. I told him I needed to see everything. We met at a coffee shop that evening. He handed me a manila envelope and warned me that what I was about to see would be difficult. He was right. The photos showed Sarah and Mark together at a hotel bar, holding hands across the table. There were pictures of them kissing in the parking lot. Video footage of them going into a hotel room together and not coming out for several hours. Date stamps showed this was happening regularly, usually on days when Sarah had told me she was working late or had team meetings. The investigator had also tracked down information about the weekend conference that never happened. Sarah and Mark had spent the weekend at a bed and breakfast about 2 hours away. They'd registered under Mark's name, but the photos clearly showed both of them arriving together and spending the entire weekend there. I sat in that coffee shop, staring at these images, and felt like my entire world was crumbling. 8 years of marriage, all the plans we'd made, the future we'd talked about, the trust I'd placed in this person, all of it was built on lies. I thanked the investigator, paid him, and drove home. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner, humming some song I didn't recognize. She looked up when I walked in and smiled, asked me how my day was. I almost lost it right there, but somehow managed to keep it together. I told her I wasn't feeling well and went upstairs. I sat on the edge of our bed, holding that envelope, trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to march downstairs and confront her immediately. Another part of me wanted to pretend I'd never seen the photos, that I could somehow go back to the ignorant bliss of a week ago. But I knew I couldn't live with that knowledge and not do anything about it. I needed to decide how I wanted to handle this, and I needed to be smart about it. I spent the next 2 days putting together a plan. I consulted with a divorce attorney to understand my options and rights. I started organizing our financial information and important documents. I prepared myself mentally for the conversation that was going to change everything. On Saturday morning, Sarah was getting ready to go to what she claimed was a yoga class. I knew from the investigator's report that she typically met Mark on Saturday mornings, usually at his apartment. I waited until she was about to leave, then asked if we could talk. She looked a little surprised but said sure, what was on my mind. I told her to sit down, that this was important. I could see the confusion in her eyes, maybe the first hint of worry. I pulled out the envelope and set it on the coffee table between us. I said, before you say anything, I want you to know that I know everything. The question is whether you're going to be honest with me now or if you're going to keep lying. Sarah's face went completely pale. She stared at the envelope like it was a venomous snake. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Finally, she whispered, "What is that?" I opened the envelope and spread out some of the photos on the table. I watched her face as she saw herself and Mark together, saw the evidence of her betrayal laid out in front of her. She started crying immediately, not the kind of tears that come from being caught, but deep, body-shaking sobs. She kept saying, "I'm sorry," over and over, but she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the photos like she couldn't believe they were real. I waited for her to compose herself enough to have a conversation. When she finally looked up at me, I asked her how long it had been going on. She said it started about 3 months after she began working at the company. They'd been working late on a big project, and Mark had suggested they grab dinner to continue their discussion. One thing led to another, and they ended up kissing in his car afterward. She said she felt terrible about it and tried to keep things professional after that, but Mark was persistent, and she found herself drawn to him. She said the emotional affair continued for months before it became physical. The weekend conference lie was actually the first time they'd spent a full weekend together. She said she'd been planning to end it, that she knew what she was doing was wrong, but she felt trapped and didn't know how to get out of the situation. I listened to all of this, and part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to think that this was just a mistake, a moment of weakness that we could work through. But the evidence was too clear, too extensive. This wasn't a one-time slip-up, this was a sustained, deliberate betrayal that had been going on for months. I asked her if she loved him. She was quiet for a long time before saying she didn't know. She said she was confused, that her feelings for Mark were intense, but that she'd never stopped loving me. She said she'd been living in this horrible limbo, trying to figure out what she wanted. That's when I realized that our marriage had been over for months, maybe longer. I'd been living with someone who was essentially a stranger, someone who'd been lying to me every single day, someone who'd been sharing intimate moments with another man while coming home and pretending everything was normal. I told her I wanted her to leave. Not permanently, not yet, but I needed space to think about what I wanted to do. She begged me to let her stay, said we could work through this, that she'd end things with Mark immediately, and we could go to counseling. But I was done. I couldn't look at her without seeing those photos. I couldn't imagine trying to rebuild trust with someone who'd been so methodically deceptive. I told her to pack a bag and go stay with her sister Emma for a while. She left that afternoon, and I spent the weekend alone in our house, surrounded by reminders of the life we'd built together. Every photo on the wall, every piece of furniture we'd picked out together, every little shared memory felt tainted now. I filed for divorce the following Monday. Sarah tried calling and texting constantly, wanting to talk, wanting to work things out, but I was past the point of wanting to fix things. The trust was gone, and I didn't think it could ever be rebuilt. The divorce process was messy and painful, but I had good legal representation and clear evidence of the affair. We didn't have kids, which made things somewhat simpler, but dividing up 8 years of shared life was still complicated. Sarah eventually moved in with Mark, which somehow made the whole thing feel even more real. They're still together as far as I know. I heard through mutual friends that she left her job at the marketing firm, probably because the situation became too awkward once everything came out. Looking back now, I can see signs that I missed or chose to ignore. The distance that had grown between us, the way she'd become protective of her phone, the subtle changes in her behavior and routine. But at the time, I trusted her completely. I never imagined she was capable of such sustained deception. The hardest part wasn't even the betrayal itself, although that was devastating. It was realizing that the person I thought I knew, the person I'd built my life around, didn't really exist. The Sarah I'd been married to for the past year was essentially a fictional character, someone who'd been performing the role of a faithful wife while living a completely different reality. I'm doing better now. I moved to a different apartment, started therapy, began rebuilding my social life. I've even started dating again, though it's been challenging to trust anyone new. Every time someone seems a little distant or takes too long to respond to a text, my mind goes to dark places. But I'm glad I found out. As painful as the truth was, it was better than continuing to live a lie. I deserved better than what Sarah was giving me, and now I have the chance to find someone who will be honest and faithful. The whole experience taught me that you can never really know another person completely. People are capable of compartmentalizing their lives in ways that seem impossible from the outside. Sarah managed to maintain her deception for months, lying to my face every single day while carrying on an intimate relationship with someone else. I don't hate her anymore. I did for a while, but that anger was eating me alive. Now, I mostly feel sad for both of us, sad that our marriage ended this way, sad that she felt the need to lie rather than just being honest about what she wanted, sad that we couldn't find a way to address whatever problems existed in our relationship before they led to this betrayal. If there's any advice I'd give to someone who suspects their partner might be cheating, it's to trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore red flags or make excuses for behavior that doesn't make sense. And if you do discover infidelity, take time to think about what you really want before making any major decisions. The initial shock and anger can cloud your judgment. I'm still learning to trust again, still figuring out what I want my future to look like. But I'm grateful that I discovered the truth when I did, rather than wasting more years of my life on a relationship that was built on lies. I deserved honesty and loyalty, and now I have the chance to find that with someone else.